yesterday in the faculty
Good morning, everyone. We're going to begin our meeting. This is the 8th in a series, as it says on the slide here. And if you've been wondering where we've been meeting with schools and colleges and support units. I'll talk more about that. But this is the 8th of our meetings that are campus-wide forums. We had 6 of them that were weekly, and then we went to the monthly format. So that's where we are today. I want to give you just a preview of what we're going to have in terms of the format. I'll share some updates, some things that we know. There's been a few developments this week. There's much work that's been done by our budget planning task force and the communication task force, and then continued meetings and discussions with governance groups. We'll then have time for our open discussion, and then I'll reserve the last 5 minutes for some comments and perspectives for looking ahead, given that this is the end of the semester and some of you may not be either on campus as much or at some of the meetings, but I'll talk about some of the things that we'll be doing in terms of next steps. So a quick recap and a few additional developments, even if you've been at some of the meetings that we've had this week, include the fact that the $300 million cut is still out there as proposed in January, and it may be closer to $350 because of questions over cost to continue. So nothing new there other than some of the other elements that are in items number 2 and number 3. Those we knew this week. Those became new information this week, where there's flat state revenue projections, which for the last month to 2 months had been part of the story, part of the footnote, if you will, of the story, that there's a desire to cut the cut, but it depends on new state tax revenues. And now we know there's likely to be very modest, if any, additional tax revenues. So that means, back to the size of the cut, that we are likely to be facing that size of cut. Now, the budget isn't the budget, as we know, until the governor signs it. So there's a lot of things that happen along the way. There continues to be many legislators who are saying we're going to look at doing anything we can to moderate that cut. You saw the governor's statement in the newspaper yesterday, which talked about the support for K-12 and UW system coming in front of the Bucks Arena. So that was part of the headlines yesterday. So that was I think, an interesting and important development. The other piece that we heard earlier this week is no restructuring. The legislature has said, Senators Nygren and Darling issued a statement that said they will not be including a public authority in the budget that's approved. So those are 2 new developments from this week. There remain, as I put in my campus memo, questions about the status of Chapter 36 and shared governance, because those were redlined as parts to go out, because they would have been presumably part of the public authority, so they would not have been part of the state budget. That's something that was going to be taken out. And of course, as the tense is appropriate here, speculation will continue. Speculation is continuing. There continues to be questions because we are not part of the budget discussions until later in the joint finance executive sessions. In terms of some of the next step, over the next 3 weeks, there's many important discussions that will be going on, and it's critical that we continue to have the advocacy that we've been having. Joint Finance Committee, we've seen the reports of the executive sessions for the next several meetings that they'll have. UW system specifically is not in next week. It typically comes at the end, but elements of the capital budget are included in some of the discussions this week. Legislative Fiscal Bureau will continue to work on the budget papers, and then later in May, the entire budget goes to the full legislature, and it's presumably going to be passed in late May or early June. Now, it's a joke that our provost will oftentimes say is that every time we see this slide, the date tends to get pushed back a little bit further, the way state budget processes work. But at this point, what we know is late May and early June is the projection. I wanted to share with you something that I've been saying and anticipating or projecting a little bit, and I've used the phrase, we've had 80 to 110 budget-related meetings over this semester. And so I sat down, and I'd mentally kind of gone through this, but I actually sat down and checked with some of my colleagues as well in terms of work that's happening. And the number is actually much closer to what you see on the bottom line of this slide. And it's conservatively that we've had about 165 meetings on and off campus this semester that we would not otherwise have had. You can see the itemization of those particular areas, the fact that we've had a dozen budget planning task force meetings and a dozen budget communication, and prep for these includes at least 20 meetings, and lots of other types of activities, internal, external. And you can see, for example, third from the bottom, the Joint Finance Committee and legislative meetings, 51. Most of those are individual, one-on-one. We had a meeting called Madison Night in Milwaukee on Tuesday night. There were probably 7 or 8 legislators, and then there were a number of other elected officials and many key players. We count that as one meeting. And so again, just conservatively, we've continued to be remarkably engaged with respect to this. I share this for a couple of reasons. One is that they're very, very good people. You, many faculty, staff, administrative leaders, alumni, and others who are working tirelessly. These meetings, you could say, well, that's what people are supposed to be doing. That's our jobs. Well, in fact, we're still doing all the other work, and I think that the immense effort that we've done is just extraordinary. It's a point of pride. The impact and the softening of the stance, I think, is something that is a result of a lot of the communication, a lot of the telling of our story. And there's great things that are told today, much more awareness, remarkable materials that we've prepared, and we need to continue that, and we will. And when Tom talks about some of the work done by the Budget Task Force and the Provost talks about this, they'll talk about some of the things that they've engaged in specifically as well. Get my clicker to work here. There we go. The advocacy aspects that build on that include the meetings and strategy that we've employed. And briefly, what we've done, and the key parts of the strategy, is that for every legislative meeting, we have a grid for the entire state, and it shows for each legislator or assembly representative how many Panthers, alumni, and students are in their district. And so we can talk to Senator Darling, and we can say, Senator Darling, you have 12,165 Panther alumni in your district. You have 765 current students, Panthers, and they are very concerned, we're very concerned about the budget, the size of the budget cut, our ability to continue to have the impact that we have, and we go through extensive work, and Senator Darling knows that. She's represented this district for a long time. But we do that with every single legislator. We've got that homework. We've got what is of interest to them, what are some of the particular areas in their background that really resonate. And so we've been having very, very thorough conversations with them, and many of them repeatedly. In terms of the campus community budget conversations, you know the numbers here already in terms of the budget town halls and the 17 school, college, and unit gatherings. Those continue. We have as many, some weeks as 4, maybe 5 meetings that we have with schools, college, and units. We find that the conversations at the school, college, and unit level is more intimate, it's more nuanced to that school or college, because every school and college has its own perspectives, questions, and concerns. And there's not one area that's not concerned about this in terms of the size of this. Lots of different updates and advocacy messages, lots of things that we've been doing. I'll show you some headlines here in a moment. And it's remarkable what is online. And if you haven't looked, if you haven't shared those pieces, I strongly encourage you to do that. There's a lot of very powerful information. I meet with different groups, many of whom are either foundation members or different groups, award recipients, and lots of things where we have a lot of UWM people, faculty, staff, alumni, donors, others in the community. I share facts about UWM, and every time people say, I didn't know this, I didn't know that, can I get more information? And I share with them the online resources that we have. But even among our friends, even among our family, we don't have as good information out there as we could have. So this is an important opportunity for us to continue to share that, and it is a remarkable story. We continue, as the message goes, to continue to talk about how we engage in our community and transform lives, and I'll talk more about that in some of my closing comments. I mentioned earlier some of the headlines, and this is a small sampling. We could fill 4 or 5 slides just like this in terms of the advocacy that this campus has led. Many, many groups, our students, where they have been active, our faculty, our staff, the leadership of our campus, many folks on our behalf. I encourage you, for example, to take a look at our campus website, and on that website what scrolls through is the transformative engagements, the ways that we engage, and you have individuals from Michelle Bria, who's the president of Journey House, one of our alumni, to Tim Sheehy, who's the president of the Milwaukee Metro Association of Commerce, to Dan Bader, which he's the president of the Bader Foundation, which is the largest major philanthropist that has supported UWM over the years, and they all talk about the ideas that we know about the transformative effects that we have in the community, on individuals, in the larger region. So, in summary, for my comments, we will continue in this last 3 weeks to keep the push. We'll hold the line. We'll continue to engage our stakeholders. We have 4 or 5 additional meetings lined up in the next week alone with legislators. We have a call that we may be having as late as this morning with some other key legislators. A lot of this has been changed because of some of the other developments around the budget. It's quite hectic right now. And the messages include these 4 points. We need to reduce the cut for us to continue to have the positive, powerful, transformational impact that we've had. We encourage legislature to continue to look at flexibilities, the types of things around purchasing, bonding, HR practices, and other activities that we have sought for decades to have in terms of streamlining some of the processes, to support a dedicated funding source so that we don't have some of the volatility that we have, and to preserve Chapter 36 and shared governance. Academic freedom, tenure, indefinite status on this campus, all of the tenets of Chapter 36 are critical. We will continue, as I mentioned earlier, to focus. The next 3 weeks are critical. Urgency absolutely remains. So I'll now shift to our work, and I believe Robin is going to share the Budget Planning Task Force recommendations.
Good morning. All right, I'll keep this fairly brief because we've covered a lot of this before. The Budget Planning Task Force started its work by considering what our long-term picture would look like and talking through a number of different options, and ultimately decided that we would look at the first year of this cut as a lapse, that is paying for that first year through cash. That does not necessarily mean paying for the first year of the cut through our balances, which we know are very low and we have less than $1 million in true reserves, but rather through temporary savings that can be achieved through our cost containment measures, such as delaying hires and salary increases, delaying not taking non-essential travel, and other temporary measures, including the results of our voluntary separation incentive plan. So we have asked all of the 5 major units on campus to provide scenarios that total up to $26 million, which we have now collected. At the time that we allocated out these scenarios, totaling $26 million, we had very much hoped that the ultimate cut would come in far lower than $26 million. Unfortunately, through the more recent developments, it looks like we may be on the high end of that in the cut as it's ultimately allocated. And so we are currently going to be planning for a cut in the first year of somewhere between $23 and $24 million. So the cuts have not actually been allocated out at this point. These are just targets that we have been asked for scenarios. The Budget Planning Task Force is going to be meeting next week for 4 hours to start our work and evaluating the scenarios that have been provided. And we will be looking at those scenarios line by line, looking at what is the proposed cut that would fill that hole and what is the impact on the campus. And we're going to be starting to evaluate and making some very hard decisions about where would be the first areas to be cut and then moving on down. When we started our work, we considered the option of furloughs, and after taking input from a number of different people across campus as well as the APBC, we decided that that was not an optimal solution for many reasons. It's temporary at best. It's limited in what we can recover, and so we've deferred our consideration of that. As we work through our one-time lapse scenarios, depending on what the cut ultimately is and how large it is and how much we can recover from other sources, we may need to talk about furloughs again. It's not been brought back on the table yet, but it's sitting out there. It's not something that we've wholly excluded, and it really depends on our overall assessment of the impact of our various options. For FY 2017 and beyond, we will have a better idea of the actual permanent cut in the next 2 months. Now, I will note that every campus budget forum, we've had that statement out there, and we haven't changed the 2 months. It hasn't shrunk because the date keeps getting pushed back. But we will know the cut around July 1st at the latest. And we're using this first round of assessing the one-time lapse as practice for then immediately after that digging in and looking at the permanent cut. We've asked all the units on campus to provide 5 and 10% scenarios for those cuts. We originally had an earlier dates. We've now extended that time frame to June 5th. And once we have that information, and we'll be considering those and the impact of permanent cuts. Simultaneously, the Budget Planning Task Force is also working on a way to solicit with a little bit more formality ideas for bigger cross-unit ideas for efficiencies and perhaps consolidation. And we will be introducing to the campus news of that soon. And our intent is to bring those ideas in simultaneous with looking at the 5 and 10% scenarios that we receive from the units as we evaluate how to apply the permanent cuts. We still have a lot more questions on the permanent cut side because we're a little bit up in the air. That looks like the public authority is dead, looks like the budget cuts may stay at their maximum level. There had been new sources of revenue identified with the public authority as well as additional costs. And without seeing a replacement bill, it's very difficult to determine exactly what we can do in future years. So we're also waiting for that information, and we'll take that into consideration as soon as we have it. That is it for me.
Good morning. On the advocacy side, the Chancellor did a great job running through a lot of the steps that have been taken over the last couple of months, so I'll be brief. I do have a couple of updates for you. Looking at the screen, you'll see one of the best examples, I think, of the results of telling our story and telling it effectively. This is an ad that the Business Journal ran this past week, a full-page color ad actually donated by the Business Journal. Mark Sablejack, who's the publisher, is a member of our Board of Visitors, and we've talked a lot to our Board of Visitors about the impact that the upcoming cuts could have on our campus and the impact it will have in the community. And he was so focused on that story that he said, we need to step up and we need to help communicate that story to the rest of the community. So the ad features quotes from both the Chancellor as well as from Tim Sheehy, head of the Metropolitan-Milwaukee Association of Commerce, talking about the value and the impact that UWM has on the community. So again, just one example of others stepping up to help us tell our story. In terms of other messaging in the recent past, since our last meeting, about a week ago, we encouraged all of our alumni who are in our electronic database to become more active. We sent out an email through Adrian Bass, who is the head of our Alumni Association, actually going to over 50,000 alumni, of whom we have active email addresses, encouraging them to now make that final push. And it really is an important message for all of us to share, both to act on ourselves and also our friends, our neighbors, and others we know who are like-minded in this, to begin, if they haven't already, contacting those 16 members of the Joint Finance Committee, because that vote is just around the corner on the UW budget. Also, along that line, we're encouraging people to continue to share the stories that we share with you each week in terms of the updates, talking about the impact and the value that UWM brings to the community. As you know, each week we send out the listing of the 3 top stories that focus on our research, our service, the teaching, and the impact that we have here. And all you have to do is go and touch the button to post it to your Facebook account or to use Twitter to go ahead and broadcast it to your network. It really does make a difference when you begin to amplify the voices that we have here on this campus. This past week, the Wauwatosa City Council approved a resolution following in the footsteps of the Milwaukee Common Council, a resolution asking the legislature to restore funding for our capital projects, in particular the investments that we're making at our research park out in Wauwatosa. And also the UWM Foundation Board received a message from Chris Fiasca, who's the president of the board, this past week, encouraging them to reach out. This is a great group of about 30 very influential citizens here in the Milwaukee area who support our foundation with their ongoing service, encouraging them to reach out to legislators. Just a couple of other items to share this morning. Our infographic team continues to be very, very active. We have another one that we created talking about the reserve fund, or perhaps I should say the lack of reserves that we have here. This one reads, UWM's rainy day fund is only 1% of its total fund balances. It's a message that we're delivering in the Capitol in our visits, along with the other message points that the Chancellor addressed, because we've heard that there are some legislators who still believe that we have vast amounts of reserves sitting there that we could tap into. And as you know from these meetings, that simply isn't the case. And we also just posted to our website another fact sheet. And again, this is that great resource that the Chancellor talked about, where you can go in and download information and arm yourself or share it with others. And this one really is more of a narrative that talks about some of the selling points or the features of UWM, and it supplements that one-sheeter that has been up there for some time. So our goal is to continue in this last couple of weeks to keep the push on, and we encourage you to do everything you can to extend the messaging, and we thank you for everything that you've done up until this point. I should note that this coming Wednesday, Chancellor Mone and Chancellor Blank from Madison will be the featured guest at a WisPolitics luncheon at the Zilber School of Public Health. It's an ongoing speaker series that UWM has sponsored for the last several years. We planned these sessions back in January of this year, and little did we know how the timing might be fortuitous in terms of extending our messaging. We still have some seats available, so if you're interested in joining us, just contact me or my assistant Laura, and we can fill out the open spaces that we've got. And I'm sure you'll be reading some media coverage about that discussion about the impact of the cuts on both UWM, Madison, and the rest of the state. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom and Robin. Now, I was remiss in not introducing our complete panel here. We have some new faces and representatives. Mark Schwartz is out of state right now, so he's not able to join us, but we have our new Student Association President, Mike Sportello, over on the side here. You know Tom, Robin. We have Jolie Erden, our Senior Legal Counsel. Randy Trumbull-Holper is here representing classified staff, and Johannes and Kate Schultz is representing our academic staff committee. And at this point, I'd ask them if you have any comments or anything you'd like to put forward, any perspectives you have on where we are with regard to the budget, communication, or other activities.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Can I get a quick show of hands of who here is a student? Wonderful. I'd like to first thank you all for coming out. I know it's not the most inviting environment for students, and that's something that we're really working together in the recent conversations to change. So thank you for coming, first of all. I'd also like to follow that up with we are engaging as a student body with the administration, with the faculty and staff in those deeper conversations of making sure that the student interests are protected. So I assure you, we're doing our part. If you'd like to talk after, I'll be free. So thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mike. Okay. Randy.
We don't have much of an update, but Classified Staff Council Executive Committee continues to meet weekly surrounding the budget, as well as meeting weekly with the classified staff councils from around the state via Skype. And if you have any questions for classified staff council, I would email uwm-csac@uwm.edu.
So that would be an example of, we did not have that in our list, Randy. So that's an example of another 10 to 15 meetings that are occurring I mean, it's just a tremendous amount of effort that people are putting in to understand, to process, and to really be able to digest and help make decisions with regard to the work that's underway. Thanks. Kate.
The Academic Staff Committee has been very involved in action and advocacy regarding the budget decisions. We're represented on the Budget Task Force. We meet weekly as well to talk about a strategy for representing the interests of academic staff. We've met with Chancellor Mone. We met with him on Monday. We meet with Provost Britz in a few weeks. I would just say, given the legislative timetable, and as Chancellor Mone mentioned, that we're sort of in the final stretch, I would invite any academic staff member who is at all interested in action and advocacy to get involved. There's an academic staff senate meeting next Tuesday afternoon at 2:30 in Engelman S 195. There's also a standing committee of the academic staff senate called the Legislative Subcommittee, and that is an open committee. Anyone who's interested in participating is certainly encouraged to do that. I see a lot of colleagues of mine from the Legislative Subcommittee here this morning. We're meeting later this morning, I believe at 10:30. Anyone who is interested in getting involved, please do either come to see me after this event or email the Academic Staff Committee or Sarah Morgan, who's the chair of the Academic Staff Committee. We really do urge any academic staff member who's interested in getting involved to do so. We are the largest group of employees at UWM, academic staff, and we really want to, as Chancellor Lujack mentioned, as Tom Lujack mentioned, amplify our voices, and really this is the time really to start amplifying our voices. I apologize. Thank you very much.
How fast things change. Wow.
If elected, I choose not to serve.
The target moves.
Sorry.
It's okay. Johannes, I don't know if you had any comments you'd like to make? Okay, great, okay. As you know, our provost serves as the co-chair of both the budget planning and communication task force, which provides an important liaison given the way that work goes. And on the communication front and on the continued communication advocacy front, my UWM radio show taping came out yesterday, and if you haven't heard that, it comes out again on Sunday. It's aired again, and then those are also archived on the UWM radio station website, so you can always access those, and they go back over every month, and you'll see the content and the tone and the change in tenor, of course, as the budget deliberations have occurred. So we now have time for questions and any perspectives that you would like to share. What I'd ask you again is, as you come up, there's a microphone up front, and just let us know who you are, and we'll want to have ample time for all the questions that are out there.
Good morning.
Morning.
Jasmine Allender. I'm an associate professor of history, director of urban studies, and a faculty senator. I've got 3 points. The first one is around rhetoric and messaging around the budget. In yesterday's Journal Sentinel, there was an article that Governor Walker suggested that the $300 million cut was only manageable if the public authority that he had proposed was going through. Let's just put that aside at whether or not that's possibly true. Let's pretend it is. And if that's the case, then rhetorically, we can use that to say, look, if the public authority indeed is dead, this cut's not manageable. So in terms of some of the messaging, it could be useful. Number 2, Chancellor Mone, you raised this, Chapter 36. We have to just keep, this needs to be our mantra right now, Chapter 36, Chapter 36, Chapter 36. It's not just about shared governance and tenure. It's about protections to Downer Woods. It's about protections to scholarships for underrepresented students. There are a whole host of things that were axed out of Chapter 36 when we got that first proposed budget. It's absolutely crucial that that get restored. Finally, in terms of the budget task force, I mean, obviously this is all happening. It's going to unfold for a campus during the worst possible time of the year, summer, right? When so many faculty and students are gone. So this is going to be particularly a challenge for the budget committee to be transparent. The students that came to the faculty senate meeting yesterday raised many good points, including their desire for transparency. And I'm sure everyone on this campus shares that same desire. The problem is right now, it feels like there are already pretty significant cuts happening at the unit level, and without any clear sense of how those cuts maybe fit into a broader picture. As a faculty member, I feel like I'm going to one meeting after another that feels a little bit like a funeral for one unit or another program. So for example, I'm on the advisory council for the Center for 21st Century Studies, one of the oldest humanities centers in the country, one of our centers of excellence. Literally the only thing that I had heard of before I came to UWM as something that was important about UWM. That center is facing an extremely large cut, much more than the 5 and 10% scenarios that the rest of campus has been asking for. So in one budget session, I fear that there are smaller units like this unit that's particularly crucial for anyone involved in the humanities, that we will just wipe away these legacies that have taken decades for us to build on this campus. So, for example, if C21 is cut in the way that's currently being proposed, I think that we will have to rename the current year. So we're going to go from the year of the humanities to the last year of the humanities. We need to ask ourselves if that's really what we want to do. Thanks.
Jasmine, if I can, whenever I can, I think it might be helpful, if I may, just respond real briefly on your first point with respect to the rhetoric. I think it's an excellent point to use that argument back, that if the manageability of this is premised on us having flexibilities, let's use that point. Couldn't agree more. The idea of Chapter 36 being a mantra, again, absolutely well put. Couldn't agree more, and think that's particularly important for us. And we did talk about that as one of the key points. The timing of this, if I can just elaborate a little bit further, this is the challenge that we face. It's very difficult because we don't even know yet what the budget cut is actually going to be. It was only this week that we learned that it may be the full size of that, and of course we've been planning for that. As I've said many times, it would be imprudent or irresponsible not to plan for the full size of the cut, given what literally is in black and white. The challenge in particular is no matter what time of year it is, we have never been more diverse, more inclusive, and more open as we've gone through a cut. We never have the size of the task force, the support group, how we've got multiple representatives from so many different perspectives. And this is the challenge. You've got 28,000 students, over 5,000 employees, lots and lots of community members, and we could never make decisions if we had everybody involved. So we're trying to find that right balance, especially because this has happened so quickly. And yet it hasn't happened. It's a hurry up and wait type of thing where we're trying to develop plans. No decisions have been made. We're really asking for the priorities. We're asking for how these cuts would be affected so that we can figure out how do you cut $24 million out of our budget in almost immediate terms, up to $24 million. We certainly hope, fingers crossed all the way around, that it does come in as less. But I do want to just share really the process and hope you understand what we're doing and all the intensive work. There's, for example, a 4-hour meeting on Wednesday followed up by another 2-hour meeting that the Budget Planning Task Force is considering all perspectives. This is out, it's open, it's really something where we're trying to communicate where we are as we go. I don't know if on the Budget Planning Task Force you want to add anything to that?
I can just say we will also then run the recommendations of the Budget Task Force by the APBC. There's a special meeting that the APBC called on the 21st of May. And there are actually more members of the APBC has been co-opted to the Budget Task Force, I think 3. So there's about 5 or 6 members just of the APBC on that specific committee. And then in terms of the humanities, as is with many other units, we went line by line through the what we could see from LNS, for example. And I do know that they also have a number of meetings to protect what they believe in. But as Mark said, that those decisions has not been made because you do that within the larger context of all centers, entities on our campus.
I would say also, reiterating that no central decisions have been made, but units are working on this, and they know that they need to come up with cash of some level, not yet determined, but they're probably in the preparations for that. Jasmine, I think your question is a really good reminder that all unit heads should be also in regular communication with their bodies about the work that they're doing, because we can't, manage all of that at the central level.
Great. Please.
Good morning, my name's Carrie Smith. I'm a PhD student in urban studies. I have a question for Mike and Chancellor Monet regarding the student sit-in yesterday. If you could tell us more information about that, what were the concerns of the students, and how are both of you continuing to work with those students to address and communicate about those concerns?
Okay. Mike, you want to take the first, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay.
So they had a couple of things they wanted to touch on. The main one was they wanted Chancellor Mone to be more public and outgoing in his stance against these budget cuts. That was their first concern. And their second concern was really one more of transparency and being more open about what's going on. I'll address the second concern first. We brought them into the Faculty Senate meeting that I was attending, just one of those monthly meetings that I attend. And really, I think that was a good point in terms of transparency. Something that, in the recent weeks I've been, trying to change. I've been as forward as I could be, and I think Chancellor Mone can attest to this, with trying to be more transparent, and they're working with us on that. It's an ongoing process. There's also a really good dialogue with those students that sit in about how these decisions are made and moving forward, how we can work together in this. And then I met with them afterwards, and I believe a different faculty member earlier in the room can attest to this, as well as the provost, to really discuss how we can meet in the future to really discuss how to move their opinions forward and really communicate those higher up. So we're setting up a meeting with that. We have all of each other's contact info, but those are the two main concerns. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, Mike. Good job. I'll add a couple things. When I met with the students, first of all, we had the students come over and address me in the Faculty Senate meeting, and I responded to their points. And then I met also with them in front of Chapman Hall and explained further and went through many of the same points that Mike and I just discussed in the Faculty Senate. The additional aspect is that we talked about not just meeting with the students this coming week, but also having a student town hall that would be in addition to other town halls. The students suggested in the fall to do that very early in the fall because most students are not here during the summer, but we will do that early on in the fall in terms of having a student town hall, and we'd invite, of course, the entire campus as well. So I think those are the main points. Okay. Yes?
Hi, I'm Nick Fleischer from Linguistics. First of all, I would just echo everything that Jasmine said about Chapter 36 and about C21, and I was encouraged and heartened to see that advocacy for Chapter 36 is one of the top priorities. Obviously, with the death of the public authority proposal, that it's absolutely crucial. So that's good to see. One thing I'm curious about is the specific kinds of advocacy that you're doing with legislators right now. That you and other system leaders are doing. With no new revenue announced this week, the governor and legislative leaders immediately came out and said that we're going to restore the cuts that were proposed to K-12. From the reporting that I've read about it, what it seems like is that those funds are being restored basically through an accounting trick, not through any new money. And there seems to be no such accounting trick that can be used for the UW system. It's a much larger amount of money and so forth. So I'm wondering what, if any, kind of advocacy the system is doing to get new money into the state. The Wisconsin Budget Project has, some good information on this. Things like accepting the Medicare expansion, scaling back some tax breaks that are scheduled to roll out, and so forth. I know that some of the legislature have said they don't want to do that, but there needs to be new money in order to soften the cut. So I wonder if you can say anything about what specifically you and other system leaders are doing to try to get new money.
Yeah, that's a great question, and you're very specific and know exactly what the issues are. The message that came out, because you referred and talked about system, I'll first talk about that. Ray Cross came out and talked about the continuing meetings that he's having with legislators exactly on this point, that we need to continue to try to open up and find new ways for there to be additional revenues. I don't think there's a lot of appetite for going back and changing the larger tenets, so the question becomes, where do we get additional monies? I'll ask Tom to speak to this too, because I know, Tom, you've had some discussions this week with legislators, but we're making the case for UWM in terms of we can't say, it's not really our call to say where you would find that money in the budget. That's really a larger legislative discussion, and they have their larger budget. But we can advocate specifically for the UWM pieces. We can advocate for why and how we're answering the question, what are we doing to make a difference in the state, much like what I hear from legislators all the time. They'll pick cities such as the Twin Cities or others in terms of making a difference in that region that helps them. So this is much of the argument that we're using, that if you want to continue to make the difference in terms of whether it's regional economic development, whether it's the fabric of communities, whether it's the employer or other aspects, you really need to continue to help UW-Milwaukee. And we talk about this in terms of the students that are affected, the careers, and lots of aspects like that. But given the news this week, the specific tack that we're also working on is trying to get meetings with legislators. We, in fact, have a call that we're trying to get with a number of friends in the community that have been supportive of UWM, and that's the call that I was referencing at 10:30 this morning, to talk about, in light of the news, it is a scramble, and the words that have been described as it is going to be very ugly for the next few weeks, because everybody now, in light of the no new revenue, is asking the same exact question you are. How do we try to change the narrative? How do we try to change the discussion? How do we relook at some of the budget assumptions that are built in? But the problem is that's always been the footnote. The big story has been mitigate, moderate the cut. The footnote, very end of the story, is all premised. When I've met with all Speaker Voss and others, they've always said we want to restore funding. K-12 has always been the front end in front of a lot of folks. That's always been a priority. And whether we're second, third, or fourth has been the big question. We will continue to talk specifically about the tactics and strategies that UWM might benefit from. So, Tom, more specifics on that?
The one thing I would add is one of the reasons I wanted to show that slide of the newspaper ad and why I thought it was so important is because it's not just us telling our story. Realize that every state agency and every group that benefits through investments that come from state spending are in there right now fighting and scrapping. And sometimes it's viewed as self-serving. There are people, who say, okay, of course you're going to go ahead and speak to why you are more important. I think what we've been successful in doing, and we are pushing to do much more of, is to make sure that the people who live in this community, who run businesses in this community, who run the schools in the community, step up and are our allies in making the case for us. It's that third-party advocacy that we believe is most effective with legislators. So when you have the head of the largest business association saying, if UWM is not supported, it hurts our interest, that becomes a message that leaves, I think, a greater impression than if it were just us telling that story. So we're beating that drum every day.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Bob DeVita, adjunct faculty, lecturer at the Lubar School of Business. I know some of you, Tom, Mark, Johannes. I'd like to offer two perspectives and recommendations. One is, I think the notion of ugly, Mark, is exactly spot on, and I think we have to embrace that. I'm proud that the UWM has, I didn't know that, the most veterans in the state, 1,700, I believe, of us.
Veterans?
Yes.
Veterans, we have almost 1,100 current students alone, and more than twice as many as in any other Wisconsin institution.
Terrific. And my point is, when you go to a Marine and you ask them how they look at adversity, they say you embrace the suck.
Yeah.
So I think we have to do that here we're at a tipping point. This is a big inflection point. And we have to do, in parallel paths, the first path is do exactly what we have to do. Rebecca Blank took a lot of heat when she started talking about what they were going to do for going out too early. Mm-hmm. And I think that was spot on. We have to do what we've got to do, adjust and adapt, as if it were the 300 to 350 million cuts. At the same time, I think we have to ignite the people that we saw quoted there, but I've also heard from other people, John Torina, Sheldon Lubar, personally talking about the aspects of the budget that are so monumental. I would like to see all of our business leaders be ignited and just go as our advocates. And I'm sure you're doing a lot of this in the background, but I would like to have sort of that transparency that we're talking about, the visibility. Now's the time for courage. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. One of the things that Bob is also, Bob, if I can point out one of our great alumni and former football players. So a lot of great things. Yes. Yes. Patrice.
Yeah, hi, I'm Patrice Petro. I just wanted to make 2 points. One, it might seem like, kicking a dead horse, but I really want to argue against furloughs. They're regressive, they're invisible, and it's yet another insult to the faculty and staff here to take another hit when there's been no raises in many years. On top of that, I follow this news hourly, and I've read about changes to our health care that they're planning for January, including changing the sick leave conversion for retirees, but also increasing what we will pay for our health care, co-pays, so on. So this, and apparently this is being voted on next week. What it amounts to on top of furloughs is truly a death by 1,000 cuts for anybody who works here, with nothing in sight. It seems like another penalty to the faculty here. So I realize if the decision is made to go forward with the furloughs, we used to joke before they were completely faux furloughs. We were all had to work. It was just a pay cut that preserved pension. And if it's being done to protect staff lines, then I'd be for it. But at the same time, I think in a certain way, it won't get us ahead. It looks like we can absorb this. And I just think it's the absolutely wrong thing to do for this campus. And I think we're going to be facing, all of us, further cuts to our benefits and our take-home pay. And as I said, it's regressive, and I care very much about that as someone who runs an office with a large number of academic staff. The second thing is, we have not yet had our budget meeting. Although we are not a school or college, we're a very large unit that brings a lot of revenue to this campus, but because of the budget model, none of it comes back to us. We're treated now like a school or college, having to self-fund any promotional or other increases, which is insane, because we don't get to keep any of our revenue. None, zero. So we haven't had our meeting yet, but it already feels adversarial and not collaborative. It's one thing when we're dealing with the legislature, but I would, as someone who's been here almost 30 years and has worked my hardest to promote and protect and UWM, that we have in the process where we have to make hard decisions, that this is done in a way that is all about moving forward together, not an adversarial relationship, which is what it feels like right now because people are panicked about what the size of this cut is going to mean.
Patrice, thank you. I'll respond, if I may, briefly. First, regarding furlough, regarding the budget timing and meetings, I'll ask Johannes and Robin to talk a little bit more about that. But on the furlough front, just a couple thoughts real quick. We did follow really a lot of the input from campus, and that's why we have not gone down that path, at least in the first round of this. So your point is well taken. That's the sentiment that many people shared. That said, we do have faculty and staff who have come forward and said, could we do a voluntary furlough? I know that might help my unit. I know that might be something that should be considered. And I have to say, nothing's off the table as we search for that $24 million. So that may be still something that's out there. And I agree with everything you've said, and we have to weigh all the different sides of that. The other comment about the timing of the meetings and things like that, I know that your unit is really part of a larger unit, the largest unit in many ways in terms of a lot of that discussion, in terms of how that's going. But I'll ask Johannes and Robin to talk about the timing of the meeting or meetings that will happen.
No, actually, I think it's a good idea to set up a separate meeting also for CIE, because we started off just as meetings with schools and colleges, and then it expanded to include student affairs. So I think what we should do is just add another meeting and have a meeting specifically with CIE. Yeah.
But I think there's, Johannes, just not to vet this out, I think what Patrice is talking about is the actual budget meeting around some of the discussion and decisions around CIE, not a CIE meeting.
No, we meet this week, I think, early next week. Patrice and I have a meeting, so then we can follow up on the details.
Okay.
Because CIE is more on the 5 and the 10% scenario planning following. And then also what we do through CMAT is really protect our enrollment management piece, really to get through the difficult times that we are in. Because if we want to survive this, we need to protect enrollment management through enrollments and through the retaining of our students. But we meet next week, so that will be
I would
good.
only say, CIE, although some of you might have come to believe that it's only about international students or international student recruitment, we have degree programs, research programs, fellows programs, study abroad, Institute of World Affairs. It's a big unit that does a lot of different things. So I want to know that when we go forward, it's about protecting what we can to the best of our ability. And it's not only around enrollment management, although I understand that as well.
Thank you. Okay. Hi, Nigel.
Nigel Rothfels. Just two quick things. The one is something that happened a little bit earlier. No decisions have been made, but decisions are being made all the time, it seems to me. And it comes down to if a colleague has decided to leave, we already know that position is going to be kind of lost at this point. And so it feels like no decisions have been made, but I think we also know the decisions are being made all the time. And we're all planning, I know in my unit we're planning to have less support next year, and so those decisions seem like they're already being made. So I wanted you to be aware that that's in our morale issue right now. Second thing is, I would like you to comment about this word which has disappeared, and I don't know, maybe it should have disappeared, and that has to do with making strategic cuts. And maybe what we're doing now is just, spreading the pain across the board, and that's what's going to happen. But is that still in your calculus at all, or are we away from that? Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. The issue of strategic cuts is still in the calculus. We are, right now, when we talk about these two issues actually come together, both your first and second point. The first point is that we're basically collecting a lot of information from schools and colleges, centers, to look at how we can be strategic and what kinds of cuts would be made where. We can't do that in the short term very effectively, though. You really need more time. Nigel, you know how long you were intimately involved with a lot of the work on the research side for the better part of 2 years for us to develop a strategic plan for the campus. So for us to, in short order, make a cut that is specifically strategic, given that we don't know the size of the cut and the fact that it's July 1, it's just impossible to operate in that short term of a focus. That said, we are especially doing what we call fast following. The deadlines, it's not like we're waiting till next year to look at year 2. We're just trying to get in a way to find in a lapse mode immediately, how do we find $24 million in available cash? So that's why we initially implemented that very fast hold off on positions. We will, and you see recruitments that are still happening for key strategic, usually enrollment related types of decisions or vitally important class sections that need to be covered, staffing around those types of things. So that's just a comment on that. Bruce, this will be our last question because I'm going to make a few comments at the end and we'll wrap up by 10. Yes.
Bruce Fetter, UWM Retirees Association, no longer a state employee. And I wanted to try to put things in a broader context because everything has shown just how much UWM is mobilized against these cuts. But in a larger context, what we're confronted with is a state government led by a governor who is more interested in making his reputation as a tax cutter than as an administrator of resources. And we have a situation in the state right now where not only is the university taking across the board cuts, but also the K through 12 system, the healthcare system, and even food for the hungry. And I think that the press is committing a malpractice by not pointing the larger context of the extent of the budgeting which our governor has inflicted upon us.
Thank you, Bruce. The final comments that I would make, and let me first of all thank you all again for being here. Thank you for your questions, your comments, your concerns. These are critical, but this is how we will continue to have our dialogue. We will continue to share information. hear your concerns, adjust course with the feedback that you provided, continue to I like your word a lot, Bruce, mobilize. That's exactly what I think has happened, thanks to our great governance groups, all our faculty, staff, students, alumni, friends, so many folks that have come forward and have so many conversations with all of us about wanting to help. What I wanted to do is share just a few thoughts about the future and talk about how we'll continue to approach this and some of the ideas or principles that I want to share. Some of you know that I've worked for the better part of the last 3 decades with all sorts of different organizations, from whether it's private medical schools, other types of academic institutions, and many for-profit and nonprofit companies around change, transformation, facing decline, how do organizations turn around. And I just wanted to share a few observations for what they are worth. One is that human nature, and all of us know just absolutely how painful, how difficult any kind of change is, positive or negative. We know this from stress, studies of stress. So this is most difficult for us because this is being done in many ways to us. This is not something we decided. This is not a course that we've charted and said, we think this isn't appropriate. We're responding to some larger environmental forces that are happening nationally. There's 8 states that specifically are disinvesting, but more fundamentally, higher education is having a huge challenge in even those states that are not known as the disinvestments. There's major issues that are going on, changes in legislature, changes in even, it doesn't matter, it's both sides of the aisle. These are huge. And I would point out that Wisconsin has a 15-year trend of declining support for higher education. This particular cut is the most acute. It's 3 times larger. So we have to put that in perspective. This is incredibly difficult. Nothing like we've ever faced before. And it's normal in that context for us to feel, as Patrice discussed, adversarial. It's normal for us to feel like circle the wagons and shoot inside. It's not the way it's supposed to work. It's not the way we're going to be as successful as circling the wagons and recognizing that we, working together, can make a huge difference. We have to. And I like, Bob, your point. We can absolutely get ugly back. Look at my face. You know, there's no question about it. We are. I am. So no question about that. But the challenge is real. We are all affected by this, and while we'll be strategic, we have to protect certain things on the campus. I've said this every single day. I've said it on tape and interviews, and I'll say it again. We are here for students. We have to continue to focus on student success. Research is critical because of our mission. We're an access and research university. That's what distinguishes us. But we have to protect those areas, and we have to look at ways in which we can continue to focus on our students. We need to think and act differently, though. You cannot absorb a cut like this and be the same. That's hard. It's difficult. But I ask and encourage all of us to think about how can we be more efficient? How can we consolidate as needed? I worked for many years in units that had multiple operations that ran in tandem. When we faced adversity in our budgets before, we combined operations and found remarkable efficiencies, and we actually served students, faculty, and staff better. This is at UWM. I've also been involved with creating units, such as the Masters in Human Resources and Labor Relations, that has sharing of student credit hours, which, by the way, is often seen as an impediment to why we can't work in collaborative manners. Things can be done. This is time to really look at the existing prevailing sentiments and the rules and say, how can we work differently? We have to. There's simply no way around it. But keeping the goals in mind around students, elevating research, continuing to engage in the community. The collaborative structure and approach, as I've said, is important. And the thing that keeps me optimistic, hopeful, and believing so much in UWM is our values and remembering why we're here. The mission that we have, the noble aspect. Every day, how I hear alumni say, if it weren't for UWM, we'd have to invent it. If it weren't for UWM, I wouldn't be where I am. I had dinner on Tuesday night with a very successful alumni, and he said where he came from, he didn't have the means, and he came to Milwaukee, and he heard about the possibility of a scholarship. He graduated, and he has given back almost $1 million. And he said, It's the least I can do. I'm taking him seriously up on the least that he can do and cultivating this in much greater depth. But this man gives his commitment for $1 million was one thing, and he's on the line for more. But every day we hear this and we see this. Last night we had a candlelight vigil for victims of the Nepali earthquake. And it tells you, we had hundreds of people. Mike, correct me, I counted at one point almost 300 people right here on the Space Plaza. Mike helped put this together with members from Dr. Kalyani Ray, Swarnjit Arorat, friends from the interfaith community. And it reminds you of why we're here. It was some of the most heartfelt, some of the most important support that you feel that. You know that that's such a core value of this campus. The positives continue. I've had the fortune over the last month and a half to meet with probably the campaign cabinets as part of Vision 2020 for most of the schools and colleges, and the people who are coming forward, the volunteers in the community who want to help us, is so heartwarming. These are some of the most powerful, supportive experiences. And I have to tell you, for our capital campaign, which has a $175 million goal, and we're well into that, we're still in the quiet phase, it's going to be a great campaign. We're going to be very successful. Many people saying, I know my support is more important than ever. I believe in UWM, and we all wear our pins, and that will be the talk that I'll be giving on June 4th to the Board of Regents. It's titled UWM, Vital to the Future. It's the most important things that we can work on. We have, meanwhile, continuing partnerships that evolve every day. Let me just tell you a couple of things so that you know that we're continuing the good work, the additional education, the additional research, the additional things that happen. M-cubed, you see this here, and some of you are familiar with that term. That stands for MPS, MATC, and UW-Milwaukee working together to increase the pipeline of successful students that graduate from our three respective institutions. We represent the three largest Wisconsin-serving student populations in our respective categories. K-12, there's nothing larger than MPS in this state. MATC, 40,000 students. There's no single two-year campus that serves as many students in the southeastern Wisconsin area in the larger state. UWM serves more Wisconsin students even than Madison. You put the three of us together, and it's very powerful. But it's important to recognize that with the new leadership and the commitment that we have made to each other, we are committed to making our students more successful and engaging in much more for our community. We're having our first discussion, public discussion with Dr. Driver from MPS, Dr. Martin from MATC, that will be Wednesday night, this coming Wednesday, 5 p.m. in the Golda Meir Library. I'll also be asking my colleagues, Vicki and Darian from MATC and MPS, to join us at the Board of Regents. I should say I've already asked them, they've agreed. They'll be joining us at the Board of Regents, and we'll be sharing even further details, and we'll talk about our process and our planning. This is incredibly important for the region. At MCW and Aurora, it's not on here, Children's Hospital, Milwaukee Fire Department, and 4 other fire departments, we have engaged in additional new partnerships, each one of them building on the success that we've had in the past. Some of them that involve persons of color, students of color, having career opportunities in healthcare. In the MFD, the Milwaukee Fire Department, and 4 other municipal fire departments working with our College of Nursing and the Medical College of Wisconsin on a community paramedics training program. Immediately, Madison Fire Department said, when can you take the next cohort? This is EMT training that's delivered on the front line. We could talk about our nursing, our education, our urban studies, and on and on and on. It's just remarkable what we do. So, last slide. What's coming up? School-college unit meetings continue. The provost referred to that, and we'll continue to have those. I've mentioned earlier the Board of Regents meeting and intensive planning, as you know, in terms of how, in a compressed time frame, we'll take the information that's being gathered and make the best decisions for the long-term interest of UWM. That's what's always out there. This is not particular to any school or college. It's the long-term best interest of UW-Milwaukee. With that, I want to thank you again and look forward to seeing you in the near future. Thanks.